A desert that moves. A desert that glows. A desert that breathes. Namibia is not empty, far from it. Across its dunes, where wind paints patterns older than time, life thrives in silence. Not loudly, not obviously, but cleverly, resiliently. Every grain of sand, every shift in shadow tells a story of survival. This isn't just a landscape. It's a living system. Adaptation carved into every species. Beauty, not in abundance, but in precision. From fog-harvesting beetles to thousand-year-old trees, from scorched red plains to coastlines swallowed by mist, Namibia is a contradiction and a masterpiece. And if you stay with me, you'll see how this place, against every odd, manages to pulse with life. The Skeleton Coast, beauty and brutality. Start at the edge, the very edge of Africa, where the Atlantic collides with the world's oldest desert. The Skeleton Coast is not just a poetic name, it's literal. Shipwrecks rust along the sand, their twisted hulls stranded by unforgiving currents. Whale bones once littered these beaches, reminders of when whaling ships met their end here. It's a place where survival feels like a gamble. Yet in that harshness, beauty thrives. Morning fog rolls in from the Benguela Current, a cold ocean stream that chills the hot desert air. This fog is no small detail. It's the lifeblood of Namibia's coastal ecosystem. Plants tilt their leaves just so, funneling droplets into their roots. Beetles perform headstands, collecting dew on their backs and channeling it straight into their mouths. If that isn't ingenuity, I don't know what is. Here, every drop counts, and nature has become a master engineer. Drive inland a little, and you'll see something surreal. Brown hyenas, rare, shaggy, ghost-like hunters, skulk among the dunes. Lions, too, prowl the beaches. Desert lions. You heard that right. They've adapted to hunt seals in a landscape that looks more like Mars than Earth. That paradox, predators on sand hunting marine life, only happens here. It's one of Namibia's many contradictions that keep you off balance and utterly hooked. And then, the human element. The Himba people, semi-nomadic herders, survive in one of the driest regions on the planet. Their ochre-red skin, coated with a paste of butterfat and ochre stone, is not just striking, it's protective. It shields them against the sun and insects. When you stand with them, you see resilience etched into daily life. Herds of goats find water holes you wouldn't even notice. Every choice, from clothing to diet, is a dialogue with the desert. The Skeleton Coast also tells another story, a colonial one. German outposts once tried to tame this landscape. Diamonds sparked frenzied rushes that left ghost towns buried by sand. Kolmanskop, for instance, now lies inland but tells the same tale. Rooms filled knee-deep with dunes, piano keys buried in silence. Civilization tried to plant itself here, but the desert always wins. It swallows what it doesn't need. And somehow, that feels right. But here's the kicker. It doesn't feel dead. Standing at Cape Cross, surrounded by 100,000 Cape Fur seals, the air vibrating with barks, and the stench of fish, you realize this desert is louder than many jungles. It's alive, just not in the way we expect. Namibia forces you to adjust your definition of life. Instead of abundance, think precision. Every organism here is a specialist, a master of timing and adaptation. Miss your moment and you're done. Geologists love this coast too. Beneath the sands lie some of the oldest rocks on Earth, whispering tales of supercontinents long gone. Scientists study the sediment layers, tracing back epochs when oceans covered this land, then retreated. What you see on the surface, bones, wrecks, dunes, is just the latest chapter of an ancient story still being written. Sossusvlei and the dunes, the living giants of sand. Shift your gaze from the coastline inland, and the landscape begins to rise, not in mountains of rock, but in mountains of sand. Towering dunes, some nearly 400 meters high, sculpted by winds that have been working at their canvas for millions of years. This is Sossusvlei, perhaps the most famous image of Namibia, where sand doesn't just lie still, it breathes, it moves, it shapes light itself. The color hits you first. These dunes glow in hues that change by the hour. Fiery orange at dawn, a rich ochre by midday, and a deep, shadowy rust as the sun sinks. The sand is ancient, 5 million years old, blown in from the Kalahari and shaped by relentless winds. It isn't just pretty scenery. It's a geological clock, a monument to time itself. Now, picture yourself at Dune 45. It's one of the most climbed dunes in the Namib. As you trudge upward, each step sinks, sliding back half the distance you gained. By the time you reach the ridge, your legs ache, your lungs burn. But then, the view. A sea of rolling sand waves in every direction, like the world's largest abstract painting. And just for a moment, you forget the effort, because standing on top of a 170-meter dune at sunrise feels like standing on another planet. But here's the twist. It's not barren. The desert here is alive, only on its own terms. Springbok leap across valleys of sand, feeding on tufts of dry grass that somehow grow where rain is a rumor. Oryx, with their long spear-like horns and white-striped faces, wander with an elegance that feels almost royal. Their secret? They can raise their body temperature safely above what most animals can endure, conserving water like living machines. In a place where others perish, they thrive. That's Namibia's rule. Adapt or vanish. And then there's Dead Vlei, one of the most surreal places on Earth. Imagine a white clay pan, cracked and hard as bone, surrounded by towering red dunes. In the middle, blackened camel-thorn trees stand frozen in time, their skeletal branches reaching up as if clawing at the sky. These trees died centuries ago, when the river that fed them shifted course. But the desert preserved their remains. They haven't rotted because it's simply too dry. They are ghosts, caught mid-gesture, in a landscape that feels more like a dream than reality. Tourists flock here for photos, but if you stand still long enough, the silence will overwhelm you. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves, just your breath and the whisper of wind over sand. It's eerie, it's humbling, and it forces you to confront just how fragile and how resilient life can be at once. But don't think of these dunes as static monuments. They move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, dunes migrate under the constant push of wind. They bury trees. They uncover new pans. They reshape the land in cycles older than human memory. Scientists study their patterns like living organisms, because in a way, that's what they are. Breathing, shifting giants of sand. For the local sand people, the desert is more than a spectacle. It's a living archive of survival skills honed over tens of thousands of years. They read the sand like a book, tracking animals, finding water hidden beneath dry riverbeds, knowing which plants carry moisture or medicine. Where most would see only emptiness, they see an encyclopedia of survival. That kind of knowledge, passed down in whispers and stories, is as precious as gold. And yet, in the midst of this ancient desert, modern conservation has taken root. The Namib National Park protects this fragile ecosystem, balancing tourism with preservation. The irony isn't lost here. People travel across the world to see a desert, something they think of as nothingness. But Namibia teaches you that nothing is the wrong word entirely. This land is full of everything if you learn to look with the right eyes. Think about it. Where else do you find a place where silence feels deafening? Where sand burns at 60 degrees Celsius by day but glows cool silver by night? Where the stars above are so sharp, so unpolluted by light, that the Milky Way looks like spilled milk across the sky? Spend one night here, and you'll never see the night sky the same again. Standing at the crest of a dune as the sun drops, shadows stretching like fingers across the sand, you understand why Namibia is called the desert that breathes life. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you listen closely, you realize this is not emptiness at all. It's fullness, measured in silence, in survival, in beauty carved out of impossibility. Etosha, the desert's kingdom of life. Just when you think Namibia is all about sand and silence, the ground shifts, literally. The dunes flatten out, the horizon stretches wider, and in the north of the country, something unexpected appears. Water. Or, more precisely, the memory of water. This is Etosha, one of Africa's greatest wildlife sanctuaries, and it looks nothing like the lush grasslands you might picture when you think safari. Instead, it's a giant salt pan so vast it can be seen from space. Blinding white, shimmering under the sun like a mirage. But here, in this stark setting, life flourishes in jaw-dropping numbers. At first glance, it's almost a paradox. How can a barren salt pan sustain some of the largest animal gatherings on the planet? The answer lies in timing and adaptation. Seasonal rains transform patches of the pan into shallow, glittering lakes. Flamingos descend in tens of thousands, painting the horizon pink. Pelicans follow, wings wide against the endless white. Then, as the waters retreat, what remains are natural springs and waterholes scattered across the edges of the pan. These become lifelines, and every creature in Etosha knows it. Etosha isn't just about numbers, it's about characters. Take the black rhinoceros, one of the rarest animals left on Earth. Here, under the careful protection of Namibia's conservation programs, their populations are holding steady against the odds. At night, these powerful creatures emerge from the scrub, their movements surprisingly quiet for such bulk, their horns sharp as history itself. To see one in the wild is to witness resilience, embodied. Or think of the predators, the lions that patrol the plains, their manes dusted with pale Etosha clay, giving them a ghostly appearance. These are not the grassland kings of the Serengeti. They are desert lions, hardened, leaner, more patient. They can go days without water, surviving on the blood and moisture of their prey. And when they hunt under the full moon, their silhouettes move silently across the salt pan like phantoms. Cheetahs, too, make their mark here, sprinting across the open flats where speed is both an advantage and a gamble. Out in the open, there's no cover. It's raw athleticism versus survival instincts, with every chase visible against the bare horizon. In Etosha, nothing goes to waste. Every victory for one is a lifeline for another. But it's not just the big animals that define this ecosystem. Look down, and you'll notice colonies of sociable weaver birds, tiny architects of the desert. Their nests are massive, sprawling structures that can weigh more than a car, housing hundreds of birds at once. Some even provide shelter for owls and snakes, a living skyscraper of straw in the middle of nowhere. It's a reminder that in Namibia, scale doesn't dictate importance. Every creature, big or small, has carved out its niche in this fragile balance. Now, here's the part that blows most people's minds. Etosha is one of the only national parks in Africa where you can self-drive. That means you're not confined to a guided tour. You can literally take your own car and roll across these plains, stopping at water holes, scanning the horizon, letting the desert dictate your pace. Imagine sitting in your vehicle as a herd of elephants crosses the road in front of you, or watching lions stalk in the twilight, the only barrier between you and them a few meters of open air. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and it feels like being dropped into the middle of Earth's oldest theater. Of course, with that freedom comes responsibility. Namibia has become a global model for conservation, pioneering community-based programs where local villages directly benefit from protecting wildlife. Poaching hasn't vanished, but the tide has shifted. People now see living elephants and rhinos as more valuable than their ivory or horns. That's not just a win for Namibia, it's a blueprint for the world. And while Etosha dazzles with spectacle, it also teaches patience. Sit long enough at one waterhole, and you start to notice rhythms. The same elephant herd returns at the same hour each day. The jackals circle when the sun dips low. The owls appear only when the first stars prick through the darkening sky. It's a choreography, rehearsed over centuries, performed every single day without an audience, except those who make the journey here. So, if the dunes of Sossusvlei show you the raw, sculpted beauty of the desert, Etosha shows you its heart, the pulse of life that refuses to quit, even in the harshest places. In Namibia, survival isn't quiet resignation. It's a performance. And every time the curtain rises on Etosha's endless plains, you realize you're not watching a documentary. You're sitting front row at the greatest show on Earth. Damaraland, where stone holds memory. If Etosha is Namibia's heartbeat, then Damaraland is its memory, etched not in books but in stone, silence, and ritual. This is a region where landscapes feel older than time itself. Towering granite outcrops, dry riverbeds that look abandoned yet flood without warning, and valleys painted in shades of ochre and rust. It is harsh, unforgiving terrain. And yet, people and life have learned to endure here in ways that defy logic. Start with the rocks themselves. Damaraland is home to Twyfelfontein, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, where ancient hunter-gatherers carved more than 2,500 petroglyphs into stone. Giraffes, rhinos, lions, animals that once roamed this very land, etched with surprising precision. These engravings date back thousands of years, but they don't just record animals. They record movement, migration, the very patterns of survival. Standing before them, you feel the weight of continuity. The people who carved these figures faced the same deserts, the same relentless sun, and yet found time to leave messages that still speak today. Now, shift from stone to flesh. This is also the land of the Himba people, semi-nomadic pastoralists, who've become icons of Namibia's cultural heritage. You might have seen photographs of Himba women, their skin and hair coated in a reddish paste made from butterfat and ochre. But what often gets lost in tourist snapshots is the why. That ochre mixture is not just aesthetic. It protects against the sun, wards off insects, and marks identity. It is both shield and signature. When you speak to the Himba, you realize that survival here is not only about adapting to the environment, but about weaving meaning into every adaptation. Daily life is dictated by cattle. Herds provide milk, status, and continuity. Villages are arranged with the kraal, the cattle enclosure, at the center, symbolizing how deeply livestock defines their world. Children grow up learning which plants can sustain goats in a drought, which paths lead to hidden water holes. Knowledge is not written. It is lived, spoken, remembered. And in a land where forgetting could mean death, memory itself becomes a form of wealth. But let's not romanticize survival. It's brutally hard. In Kauko land, further north, droughts can last for years. Families trek miles for water, carrying heavy buckets from wells dug into dry riverbeds. Livestock perish, and with them, security. And yet, communities persist. There's resilience here that feels almost superhuman. And yet it's simply human at its most stripped down. Persistence, adaptation, communal reliance. Here's the paradox. Damaraland feels empty, but it's full of stories. Every rock shelter, every trail, every village carries a narrative of resilience. Even the landscape itself speaks. The Brandberg Mountain, Namibia's highest peak, is sacred to the San people. Within its caves lies the famous White Lady Rock painting, an enigmatic figure surrounded by hunters and dancers. Archaeologists debate its meaning, but what matters is that for millennia, this mountain has been a spiritual compass, a place where people came to connect Earth with the divine. When you drive through Damaraland, it's easy to underestimate it. Distances are vast, villages sparse, and the silence can feel heavy. But stay longer, and you notice details. The way the late afternoon sun turns granite cliffs into fire. The way a Himba elder describes herding routes from memory alone. The way elephant tracks appear like signatures across dry river sand. The desert isn't dead. It's deliberate. It gives nothing freely, but it rewards those who pay attention. For Namibia, Damaraland is not just cultural heritage. It's a survival manual. The petroglyphs remind us of how long humans have been here. The Himba remind us of what it takes to stay. The wildlife reminds us that adaptation is universal, not just human. And together they form a mosaic of endurance that feels almost timeless. So, if Etosha shows the abundance of life, Damaraland shows its endurance. Here, life is not about thriving. It's about persisting, generation after generation. And maybe that's why standing in Damaraland feels different. You don't just observe history. You witness the raw mechanics of survival. It's a place that doesn't flatter you with abundance. It tests you with scarcity. And in that test, you realize the desert doesn't just breathe life, it demands it. Skeleton Coast, where the ocean eats the desert. If there is one place in Namibia that defies reason, it's the Skeleton Coast. Imagine standing on a beach where the Atlantic hurls itself against endless dunes, where waves crash not against cliffs or palm-fringed bays, but against raw desert. It's one of the strangest, most hostile coastlines on Earth, a place so lethal that early sailors nicknamed it the land God made in anger. And yet, it's mesmerizing. The contrast alone feels surreal, an ocean overflowing with life colliding head-on, with a desert defined by absence. No gradual transition, no soft borders, just water meeting sand with nothing in between. But here's the catch. This coastline is far from empty. It's a paradox, lethal and life-giving at the same time. Let's start with its infamous reputation. For centuries, this shore was feared by sailors. The Benguela current pushes ships off course, fog blinds navigation, and treacherous surf makes landing impossible. Many vessels never escaped. Even today, rusting shipwrecks dot the beaches, their skeletal frames half buried in sand. Some lean like crooked monuments, others look freshly shattered, even though they've been there for decades. They're eerie reminders of human fragility against natural forces. It's not hard to see why the coast earned its name. But shift perspective, and the same forces that doomed ships actually sustain one of the richest marine ecosystems on the planet. That Benguela current, cold and relentless, brings nutrient-rich waters up from the deep Atlantic. These nutrients fuel plankton blooms, which in turn feed fish, which attract seals, dolphins, and whales. Namibia's seal colonies, especially at Cape Cross, are some of the largest in the world. Tens of thousands of Cape Fur seals crowd the beaches, barking, diving, clashing for space. The sound alone is overwhelming, a raw symphony of survival. It doesn't stop there. Seabirds wheel overhead, flamingos gather in lagoons, and offshore whales breach as if to remind you that abundance exists just beyond the surf. This is the strange truth of the Skeleton Coast. It looks dead from the shore, but in reality, it pulses with hidden vitality. Now, step inland, and the paradox deepens. Fog is the lifeline here. The same fog that wrecked ships rolls in from the ocean and blankets the dunes, bringing precious moisture to the desert. Beetles climb sandy ridges at dawn, lifting their bodies to collect dew droplets that condense and slide down into their mouths. Plants twist their leaves to trap moisture. Even desert lions and hyenas adapt, learning to hunt seals along the coast. Survival is shaped not by rivers or rain, but by mist. A coastline literally breathing life out of thin air. Then there's Swakopmund, the coastal town where German colonial history meets adrenaline tourism. Walk its streets, and you see Bavarian-style architecture set against desert dunes. Bakeries sell strudel. Street names echo German towns. And yet, the Atlantic is right there, pounding the shore. Today, Swakopmund thrives as a launchpad for desert adventures, sandboarding, quad biking, or flying over the dunes where they spill directly into the sea. It's strange, almost theatrical. A European facade dropped into a Namibian desert town. But it works, and it underscores Namibia's layered identity, part African, part colonial, part global. Further north, the Skeleton Coast becomes more desolate. Roads disappear, settlements vanish, and the desert swallows everything. This is not a place of convenience. It's a place of confrontation. You feel small here. The horizon stretches unbroken. The air smells of salt and rust. and the silence presses against you. It's one of the last true wildernesses on Earth, so inaccessible that much of it remains untouched. But what does the Skeleton Coast mean beyond spectacle? It's a reminder of balance, how fragility and abundance can exist side by side. To sailors, it was a graveyard. To seals, it's a sanctuary. To Namibians, it's both history and identity. It forces you to consider survival from multiple angles: human, animal, and ecological. Driving along this coast feels like stepping into another world. On one side, dunes rise like golden mountains. On the other hand, the Atlantic heaves endlessly. In between, wrecks decay, seals bark, and fog drifts like breath across the sand. It's haunting, it's humbling, and it challenges every assumption you might have about what a desert or a coastline should look like. And that's the truth of Namibia. It thrives on paradox. The Skeleton Coast is not just a boundary between land and sea. It's a collision point where destruction and creation coexist, where every wreck tells a story of loss, and every colony of seals tells a story of abundance, where mist itself becomes water, and survival becomes art. In a way, this coast sums up Namibia itself: unforgiving, unforgettable, and alive in ways you don't expect. The future of Namibia: conservation, energy, and identity. Namibia is often described as ancient, but to stop there would be a mistake. This is not a country frozen in amber, it's a nation negotiating the future in real time. And the choices made here matter far beyond its borders. Start with conservation. Namibia is one of the pioneers of community-based wildlife management. After gaining independence in 1990, it made a bold decision: give local communities control over wildlife in their areas. The result? Conservancies. Imagine rural villages deciding how to balance cattle grazing with elephant migrations, or how to share revenue from safari tourism. It flipped the old colonial model on its head. Instead of outsiders dictating conservation, locals became custodians. The payoff has been enormous. Black rhino populations recovering, elephant ranges expanding, cheetahs finding refuge. In a world where wildlife is shrinking, Namibia shows that coexistence is possible when people are empowered. Now, shift to energy. Namibia has one of the highest solar radiation levels on Earth. Entire regions bathe in sunlight almost every day of the year. That makes it a prime candidate for solar power, and now for green hydrogen. In fact, Namibia is positioning itself to become Africa's hub for renewable hydrogen, a fuel that could decarbonize industries worldwide. Picture the irony. The same desert that looks empty could power parts of the global economy. Sand, sun, and science converging into a resource more valuable than oil. That's Namibia's future flex. But development is never simple. The balance between resource use and environmental protection is delicate. Mining for uranium, diamonds, and rare earths provides vital revenue, but also raises questions about sustainability. Can Namibia build a future that benefits its people without compromising the very landscapes that define it? That's the test, and it's not a hypothetical one. It's unfolding now. Then there's identity. Namibia carries multiple histories: indigenous traditions, German colonial scars, South African occupation, and now 3 decades of independence. You see this mosaic in its languages: Oshiwambo, Herero, Nama, German, Afrikaans, and English, all spoken here. In its food, game meat grilled alongside European pastries. In its music, traditional rhythms layered with Afrobeat and hip-hop. Namibia doesn't flatten these influences. It weaves them together. The result is a culture that's uniquely its own, resilient, adaptive, forward-looking. And perhaps that's the point. Namibia doesn't fit into neat categories. It's a desert nation with life bursting out of sand, a young democracy with ancient traditions, a land where elephants walk across dunes and satellites beam Wi-Fi into remote villages. Its future lies in navigating paradox, growth without losing authenticity, modernization without sacrificing ecology. The world will keep looking to Namibia for diamonds, uranium, and now hydrogen. But if you really want to understand its future, look not at what it exports, but what it protects. Look at the conservancies, at the wildlife corridors, at the decision to let mist-fed beetles and desert lions survive in harmony with human ambition. That's where Namibia's true wealth lies, in proving that life doesn't just adapt to extremes, it thrives because of them. So what do you call a place where deserts bloom, oceans feed, and ancient cultures walk side by side with modern ambition? You call it Namibia, the desert that breathes life. It's a land of contradictions that somehow make sense, where fog gives water, sand fuels energy, and silence holds entire histories. You don't come here to tick off sites. You come to be unsettled, humbled, reshaped. Because Namibia doesn't just show you landscapes. It shows you balance. And once you've stood on its dunes, listening to the Atlantic roar against golden sand, you realize some places don't just survive. They redefine what survival means.